Oh my goodness. I'm so excited to have my new friend Claire on for this conversation on Soulful IVF. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here and that we got connected through a mutual friend who we adore, Bree Dimmitt. You grew up with
Yeah.
her.
Yes.
Um, I know her very well. We both were at her launch party of her new album
Mhm.
and incredible. She's a singer-songwriter, storyteller. Shout out to Bree.
Yes.
And she connected us. So
Yeah, she
I'm really,
did.
really grateful. Yeah. And she was also the moon guest expert for our moon circle, which was in August. So um,
Yes.
she's just amazing.
Yes,
And
she is. She's a rock star.
and you yourself truly are a rock star. And I created this podcast to share stories like yours and highlight incredible individuals. I mean, just in the brief time before, and when we first spoke, it's like what you've overcome and what you've gone through, a survivor of many kinds, as you say. And I just want to open it up to you because this is a heartfelt, intimate conversation just for you to share. And this is why you wanted to come on, is just to be a voice, share your story. And yeah, tell me what inspired you to say, yeah, I want to get out there and share my story.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel really empowered to share my story because I got great support and empowerment from hearing other stories when I was in the depths of infertility or really just difficult seasons throughout life. And I think that when we share our stories, as we've walked through really difficult things, it gives a voice to those stories. It allows us to make meaning of them. And hopefully, they reach someone to whom it resonates with and gives them hope, gives
Mm,
them what they need to keep going. Because
mm,
the difficult seasons, they don't last forever. But when you're in it, it can
yeah.
feel like it's never going to end. So I am just excited to be with you, Lisa, and to share my story, pieces of my story, and um, hopefully connect
Mm,
with other women who are listening to this,
yeah.
who are navigating infertility, whatever that looks like for them.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, your your birth and your early childhood years, I'm sure they were very transformative and how it's shaped your outlook on life.
Yeah.
And you shared with me at 15 months old. I'll
Yes.
let you
So
share.
I am the youngest of four girls. I have three
Mm,
older sisters. And when I was 15 months old, I was diagnosed with pediatric liver cancer. And so my family was living in the suburbs of Chicago at the time, where my parents were born and raised, as well as my sisters.
mm,
And this diagnosis was completely out of the blue and really life altering for all of us. I went to my 15-month well baby checkup. I am grateful that I don't have memories of this and that I have been
yeah.
told the story by my parents, my amazing parents,
Mm,
who do
mm,
have very vivid memories of this, and
mm,
went to a 15-month well baby checkup. And the pediatrician felt a tumor on my liver when he was just doing that gentle kind of massage over a little
mm,
human. And very quickly, things escalated, and I was diagnosed with hepatoblastoma, which is pediatric liver cancer. About a week later, I underwent surgery to resect the tumor from my liver, and then following had 4 rounds of chemotherapy that I was admitted to Children's Hospital for. And my mom would check in to the hospital and stay with me while my dad would take care of my three sisters at home, and they'd come
mm.
visit us on the weekends and stay at the Ronald McDonald House. And
Wow.
yeah, an incredibly transformative experience and part of my story before my conscious memory was even really formed. And so
Mm,
that has been a part of me forever and a part
yeah.
of who I am and my story.
How many years did that span going through treatment?
I was diagnosed in October of 1991, and my treatment ended in late spring, early summer of 92. And then I had regular follow-up appointments and imaging for pediatric cancer survivors. It's not until they hit the 5-year mark of no evidence of disease that they are really deemed in remission. But active treatment stopped, concluded about 6 months after my diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and it was in the early 90s, and things were different and conversations were different. And so really growing up, the only side effect of treatment that I really was at the forefront and I really lived with was a slight hearing loss. That is a common side effect from one of the chemotherapy drugs that I had. And so I have a high-pitched frequency hearing loss that impact how I develop my own speech. And so going through speech therapy and having my teachers wear a little microphone clipped onto their shirt as I was growing up and through school, that was, well, it had its own challenges and bumps in the road and confidence, an impact to my confidence as a young person. That was really the only side effect of treatment, which I was very grateful for. Until down the road when my husband and I tried to grow our family and try to have children, and became a part of the worst club with the best members as we started to start the path of infertility.
Yeah. So that conversation, as you were embarking on wanting to grow and start a family, was that presented to you? Like your past history could have potentially affected your fertility with what you went through?
Not initially. So
Okay.
I got married and did let's hold off a year or so to start our family and enjoy the honeymoon phase. And so then that year, came to an end, and we just started to naturally try to have a family like you learn about in school and see about in movies, and it's so easy.
Yeah. Right.
And it just wasn't. And month after month came and went, and we weren't successful. And so it wasn't I until we sought out a reproductive endocrinologist at a fertility clinic here in Denver, and I presented my history, that it was finally spoken to me of, oh, you had chemotherapy as a toddler. We know that chemotherapy impacts both men and women's fertility. So this could very well be a factor as to why you have not been able to get pregnant naturally. And when that was presented to me, I felt a little silly because I am a social worker and I work in oncology and I support young patients who have been given a diagnosis, adult patients, 18 and older. And when they are young, 20s, 30s, 40s, we talk about fertility preservation. And all of a sudden it clicked that, that was also my experience, but just well before a conversation would have been had by a medical team, so to speak. So, and then after that kind of came to light in talking with our reproductive endocrinologist, I then spoke back with my parents, and my mom was able to actually dig out some paper records of my care. And sure enough, there was a document with the 4 chemotherapy drugs I received and a list of potential side effects, and impact on fertility was there in black and white. And all of a sudden things started to make a little more sense. You can never connect it for certain, just because it's been so long and there's really no way to test what caused unexplained infertility, which is ultimately what we were diagnosed with. But it started to give a little bit of a light to kind of the why. And it was a wild experience to just kind of start to put those pieces together.
Gosh. And then to find out, unexplained. That's one of the most frustrating diagnoses that people get. And as my fertility doctor would say, let's call it unspecified infertility. Like there's something we can't specify. But
Oh, I love that. I've never heard that.
yeah,
Yeah. Putting that unexplained just makes it
right?
feel so ambivalent and, well, I don't know, we can't explain it, but let's move forward from it. It's such a hard
Yeah.
place to just exist.
I feel you.
Yeah.
So lead us down the path of you started testing with your clinic, and
Yeah.
what was the course that they kind of guided you through with treatment?
Yeah. So I think we sought out our clinic in the fall of 2019 and started, the testing. And again, just this
Mm.
unexplained, everything
Yeah.
seemed normal from all of it, the ovarian reserve and my
Yeah.
husband's factors, everything seemed normal. There shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
And so after that was in late fall, we decided to go through the holidays and then look at starting some the path of treatment in 2020 because it was
Mm.
just really heavy.
Fun.
Yeah.
2020 surprise. Let's
Then
start
2020
treatment.
came. Yep. So we came to the conclusion that we would try 3 IUIs because there wasn't this substantial reason as
Yeah.
to why we weren't successful. And so maybe we just needed a little bit of help. That's kind of what we
Mhm.
kept saying. So our first IUI was scheduled for the third week in March 2020. And
Mm.
a week before that, COVID hit and the world shut down and fertility treatments were halted
Yeah.
amongst everything.
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking and for everyone terrifying and confusing and what happens here.
Mm.
Um, I will say, on the flip side, I remember speaking to my therapist who I got established with kind of well early into our maybe infertility world. Like we didn't even know yet.
Mm.
I'm like, this is
Mhm.
hard already. I need
Good for
to get
you
this
for getting a jump
outlet.
on that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And she followed me through it all. So she was
Love it.
wonderful. While it was so heartbreaking to have that canceled and the world shut down, and on the other side of the coin, I remember telling my therapist, for the first time, I don't feel alone because I know every other woman and couple experiencing infertility, everyone is halted right now.
Mhm.
And for the first time, I feel like I'm a part of the others. Like I feel
Mm.
like I'm a part of a larger community almost, which is strange to
Yeah.
say, but I just felt so lonely and so isolated throughout all of infertility that all of a
Mm.
sudden I knew I wasn't the only one. And so my heart broke for everyone, not
Yeah.
just me. And so in a way, like, okay, well, everyone is feeling what I'm feeling
Yeah.
for the first time. I feel like other people get what I'm feeling. And so in a weird way, that kind of softened the blow, I guess,
Mm.
of this
Mhm.
treatment, unexpected pause. But
Mm.
luckily, very quickly, ASRM came out and said, within a couple of months, it's okay and it's safe to move forward with fertility treatment. So
Mhm.
in the summer of 2020, when I turned 30 in June, and I had my first IUI in June and found out it was unsuccessful the day before my birthday.
Oh,
What a great birthday present.
yeah.
And then our second in July and our third in August, all that were not
Mm.
successful. And so, I think, and I don't mean to speak for other women or couples, but I think you just have all your fingers crossed and all your toes crossed that IUI will just be it for you. You don't have to go down that path of IVF.
Mhm.
It's so
Mhm.
scary. There's so much. And, the summer ended and we were like, okay, this is what's ahead for us. Um, so we met with our doctor and regrouped and decided that IVF, egg retrieval process, um, was our next step, which we moved forward very quickly and completed, had our egg retrieval in October.
Mm.
Um, I remember my husband and I were driving out to Evergreen, Colorado, so in the foothills of
Mhm.
where we live. And picking up a snowblower that my husband bought on Facebook Marketplace when I got the call from the clinic of how many embryos we had.
Oh,
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have good service. Just wait.
oh,
And you know how that
the
getting
worst
that
timing.
call
Yes,
is.
yes, I'm
Yes,
here.
I'm here. I can hear you. And then afterwards, we had driven to like a little spot for lunch, and there was this little pumpkin patch, and we went and we got 8 little pumpkins because we
Oh
had
my
gotten
gosh.
8
I love
embryos.
that. It's
And we
amazing.
were like, okay, this is we're gonna take these little 8 pumpkins home and represent the hope that we have
Yes.
for the future. And so we chose to um, get our embryos genetically tested. And out of the 8, we had 4 that were genetically normal, which we were grateful for.
Yeah.
But you also grieve those that
Yeah.
weren't. And it's
Very much
that is,
so.
yeah, that's a interesting process I wasn't prepared for.
I can relate to that. Yeah, we had out of 7, 1 healthy embryo. And the first round, it was the first 4 and genetically tested them and came back, thinking 4 potentials, right? Like we're so excited. It's around Christmas time. 4, right? And then none of them were healthy. The next 3, only 1 was healthy. So it's a form of grieving, of loss, right? When
It
you're
absolutely is.
hold so much hope for these,
Yeah, absolutely is. There's so much
hmm
grief in infertility, regardless of whatever the final outcome is for
Yeah.
you and your family.
Yeah.
There's so much
hmm
constant grief, even anticipatory grief. I mean, there's so much
Yeah.
wrapped up in it.
Yes.
Um,
Wow.
but
4 little pumpkins. Okay. 4
4
potential.
little pumpkins. I'm like, okay, so now these 4 can go on this side, these 4 go on this side.
Oh.
And so I remember we met with our doctor to talk about a transfer and preparing for that. And she said, okay, so you have like a 5AA and this is your best one, your best
Yeah.
quality, the best grade. So we're going to transfer that. And I remember going, well, okay, do you think we should transfer like the second best in case it doesn't work? And then we like still have our first best, like as a backup.
Oh.
And she literally said to me, when you have Michael Jordan on your team, you don't put in Scottie Pippen before him.
I love that.
That's literally what she said. My family is born and raised in Chicago. I was born in Chicago.
Yeah.
I moved
Yeah.
to Northern Indiana when I was 5. And I was like, okay, we got to go with MJ. We're going with MJ. So,
I love that.
no questions asked.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I prepped my body for the transfer, and and probably many women listening know the process of that and the daily shots and the hormones and all the things and the knots and all of it. And we transferred our Michael Jordan on December 30th, 2020. And I remember writing in my journal, I've listened to your podcast and you're a journal writer too.
Yeah.
And I remember writing that 2020 was the most devastating year for many people for many different reasons. And our 2020 was ending with so much hope. And I felt so lucky to be closing out such a difficult year with that hope. And so we had our transfer. I did the pineapple. I did the McDonald's fries. I know Dr. Green said there's nothing behind all that. I did it
You have
all.
listened to a lot of you're on it.
I have. But I did it all. I barely moved. I know you're supposed to move, but I couldn't,
Yeah.
And then as you and I briefly spoke about from an angel number standpoint, on January 11th, 1/11, we got the phone call that our transfer was successful and I was pregnant. We were pregnant.
Amazing.
And then right away afterwards, I peed on a stick to see the positive pregnancy test for the first time in my whole life. Oh my gosh, I had a true PTSD relationship with pregnancy tests, and I hated them. And then I got the call and I was like, I need to see it. I need to see it.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh. I
I took
love
a test and and we were pregnant, and it was a successful pregnancy, and
Mhm.
our beautiful daughter was born 9 months later in September 2021. And all throughout my pregnancy, I saw 111 everywhere all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
A lot of people see 1111. Everyone has their own thing, but 111 just every time I looked at the clock, right? And that was the day we found out. And so 111 was always really sacred to me. And, I think everyone is, regardless of your path to pregnancy, I think everyone's experience with pregnancy and being pregnant is different. And I just loved being pregnant. I
Me too.
absolutely loved it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Me too. Yeah, I miss it. I mean, our one
I do
embryo,
too.
right? It's like I was just soaking it all up.
Yeah,
I loved having a big belly. I mean, I didn't love the swollen ankles and wearing the
sure.
compression socks and those parts of things, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. All of
Me
it
neither.
went the way it was
Right.
meant to go.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yes, I loved it. And I also, I remember telling my therapist, I've never felt more like myself, like my authentic
Um,
self, than when I was pregnant,
yeah.
which was such a beautiful gift. And then strangely, there's that grief that exists after it,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yes.
it's such a complicated process. But yes, I love the experience.
Mm.
And I think there's something, when you try, for me, when I have reflected back on all the process, and what is the light through the storms and the darkness,
Mm.
the fact that every other IVF mama out there was able to love their child well before they were even, a part of your womb.
Yeah.
And from the first moment they were a part of you, to know them and to love them that much longer, to
Yeah.
me feels like a really special thing that I'm in a strange way grateful for. Like, I was able
Mm.
to love my daughter well before I even knew her.
Mm.
And I wished for her, and I hoped for her, and I prayed for her, and that
Mm.
feels special to me.
I get
Um,
chills as you're talking. It's reminding me, my friend Donna wrote a book called Love Me In. And it's like this pre-pregnancy kind of book where, it's like we're loving our babies in. What we're doing.
Absolutely.
We're preparing.
Totally. Totally. Yes.
So beautiful.
Yeah. So that was, that's the timeline of it all. It was a very hard road emotionally for me.
Mm.
And I know it is for everyone. I just, one of my dearest friends who was going through IVF also told me she was pregnant with her IVF baby a couple months, I think, before we had started,
Mm.
or prepping for a transfer. And I was heartbroken. And here is my best friend who's also going through the same thing. Her pregnancy, her successful transfer should have I felt like should have given me nothing but hope. And
Yeah.
I was devastated. And I remember then feeling so guilty that I was devastated.
Mm.
Like, what was happening? And I felt really alone through all of it. Just like, I felt like a shell of myself.
Mm.
The joy was so scarce, and it was just a really, really hard ride for me. And it's still hard for me to think about that, and to think about the um, the jealousy, the deep, deep sadness, um, the pain of pregnancy announcements for someone who it happened so naturally for. Yet I would never want someone to go through what I've gone through. So why is there pain there? It's a very,
Yeah.
for me, it was a very complicated emotional process.
You're speaking to every woman out there right now. Like
Mm.
everyone listening, I think can relate on some level. You're happy, you're happy for them, yet it's like this pain, this unexplainable, like you
Yeah,
question why and the hurt. It's a conflicting
yeah.
mixture of emotions.
It really is. It really
Mhm.
is. like I said, I have three older sisters who I love so
Mm.
dearly, and we're so close. They're friends. They're my sisters, and all of them had two kids each, um, with with little issue becoming pregnant, and I just,
Mhm.
yeah, that why, and um, it's really hard. But if there are people listening having those same feelings, I hope you know that you are not alone in those feelings, and
Mhm.
um, I hope you allow yourself to rid some of those guilt related feelings, and just let yourself feel it. I remember seeing on Instagram like a graph of grief, like just a
Mm.
visual of how grief, all the pieces of grief, and how intense it can be. And I think it was on like a fertility support page, and it was talking about how, grief is so hard to go through and walk through. And when
Mhm.
you are facing infertility, you go through that grief process every single month. It starts
Mm.
over every month.
Mhm.
And like, we're
Yeah.
not programmed to deal with that devastation and that deep, deep grief just over and over and over
Yeah.
again. And that's what it felt like for me. And yeah, I do think that's what it feels like for a lot of women, for a lot of men, for a lot of couples. It's really
Mm.
hard.
The resiliency it takes, right? I mean, what supported you, would you say, through some of those times?
Therapy.
Mhm.
Really did. I am so, so grateful for my
Mm.
therapist. Journaling to really
Mm.
get my thoughts out that sometimes felt kind of suffocating a bit.
Yeah.
To just let them out, release them, gave me some relief from that. Um, Also, devastatingly, but incredibly supportive, I have several very good friends who also went through IVF. And again, my heart was broken for them, but they also were wonderful supports.
Mm.
To have friends who just got it, right? And you
Yeah.
didn't even have to say it. Um, so connecting with other people going through this, and I did have different kind of God moments of different people put in my life
Mhm.
um, that kind of kept carrying me forward of, you're not alone in this. Here are these
Mhm.
signs. And I didn't know exactly what those signs meant, but they carried me forward. And I do think those were some sort of kind of something bigger than me to bring those
Mhm.
people into my life, or those experiences into my life right when I needed them most. So therapy support, mental
Mhm.
health support was a crucial part of my journey. Um, Journaling and connecting with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And my
Absolutely.
partner, my husband, he was a huge support through it. But my gosh, that's a really hard walk alongside your partner who's grieving, and your grief looks and feels different. And so he was a wonderful support, but there were times that he didn't know what to do or what to say, or how.
Mm.
He was always very hopeful that this would pan out the way it was intended. And I believe it did.
Yeah.
Um, but it was hard for me to grasp that hope when I was filled with so much sorrow.
Mhm.
Um, but thank God, I remember right after our transfer, we left, and my husband drove us, and I'm like kind of a fast driver. I'm not like the best driver. I think I'm really good, but I'm like, come on, God, get out of my way.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember my husband driving, and I was like, can you go a little faster? Like, I've never seen you drive so slow. Come on. And he was like, you're pregnant. There's a
Precious
baby on board.
cargo.
Yes. And I'm like, well, we don't really know. He's like, nope, you are. You are. From the
Wow.
minute we left the transfer, he was like, you're pregnant, you're pregnant, you're pregnant. And I'm like, and so he was
Um,
always really hopeful and really solid. But
that's
when you're
wonderful.
feeling, such
Mhm.
fear and sadness pretty regularly, it's hard to fully lean into that. Or it was for me, I should say.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all that and just what supported you. And you're right. We're not meant to do this alone.
No.
You've shared with me a couple other things that you've survived.
Yeah,
Would you like to share a little bit of that?
sure. So pregnancy was some of the best 9 months of my life. Um, but unfortunately, my daughter's entrance into this world was nothing like we had expected. And it was a pretty traumatic birth. And I use that word because I had never heard of birth trauma before I had my daughter. But then after having lived through birth trauma, I kind of dove deep into Instagram and started to find, and then social media, and started to find some support. And birth trauma is a real thing, and it's a community of survivors. And without going into so many details, because there's a lot there, my daughter was she was born naturally, vaginally, and she was a big girl, 9 pounds, 7 ounces, and she was healthy as could be. But I wasn't. And the reason why I do want to share a little bit about this is because I do believe it's connected to advocacy for IVF moms. I suffered a uterine atony and a retained placenta, which resulted in a severe hemorrhage. And so my body was so exhausted after laboring, pushing, I guess I should say, for 3 hours. So my uterus didn't clamp down as it should naturally to stop the bleeding, as well as my placenta wouldn't come out. It's often known as a sticky placenta. And it can be common in IVF pregnancies. It's my understanding that we're not sure why it's common, but there is a connection. Unless you know.
So interesting. I don't. I also had some retained placenta, and traumatic birth in a way too, which I haven't shared a lot about, but I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because what in my perspective and my experience, what made my birth, the birth of my daughter, traumatic wasn't necessarily the medical complication by itself, but unfortunately, my medical team's response made it very traumatic. They didn't seem prepared at all. And there was a lot of chaos and a lot of fear from my team as I was hemorrhaging, and things got really bad really quickly. And so I share that to say that a same friend, actually, who told me she was pregnant before I was, she also has a very healthy little one, actually 2 from IVF. And she delivered at a different hospital. And her team, when she checked in, they were like, "Oh, IVF mom. Okay, check. Let's get some blood on backup, maybe transfusions." And it was kind of their protocol. "Oh, we see IVF in a chart. We're going to prepare because we know that a retained placenta can be really common."
That's incredible.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So that they could handle that outcome with a quick response and calm. And that's just not what I got. And then there was
that about with IVF mamas. I was
yes.
And I'm going to dive into that more because
please do.
This is
and I don't share this to make anyone fearful who is expecting an IVF baby, but I didn't know either. And I wish I would have, to advocate for myself or just educate myself better. So when something happened, I could say, okay, I understand. I know this is normal. My team is going to handle this. I had no clue what was happening, and neither did my husband. And that made it very traumatic. He was kicked out of the room, and we even said goodbye at bedside. And I said to him, I said, "You got this. You have my family. My family's not local. You guys got her." And he's like, "No, we don't." But I was in this really strange state that I've never been in before, where I really thought the end of my life had presented. And I remember saying just to myself, okay, this is why I was here. This is why I survived cancer 30 years ago, to bring this sweet baby, to fight like hell to bring her into this world. And I've done what I need to do. So if this is my story, if this is how this ends for me, I did what I was supposed to do, bringing this girl into this world. It's really hard to think about now. She just turned 3 and she's perfect, and she loves me so much, and I love her so much. And I wasn't meant to leave this world as she came in, but it felt that way in that moment. And so I do share that just to say, if
Mm-hmm.
you are an expectant IVF mom, talk to your team about it.
Yeah.
Feel educated, feel like you can advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Infertility for me felt like something that I honestly had no control over. And if there are pieces throughout the process that you can take some power back, ask your medical team these questions. Feel prepared about a birth plan. Feel prepared about a B, C, D, and E birth plan,
Mm-hmm.
as much as you can, of course. But
Mm-hmm.
those are the ways that I think we can take power back and control back in a situation that for me, I felt very powerless in. Um, so yeah, that was a really hard ending to a beautiful pregnancy and a
Mm-hmm.
really hard beginning to motherhood,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially a, a motherhood um, that I fought really hard for. Um, there was a very slow recovery from a physical standpoint, having
Mm-hmm.
lost so much blood and gone through blood
Yeah.
transfusions and then iron infusions. And it was really
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
And I did end up um, a couple months later being diagnosed with postpartum depression and post-traumatic stress disorder from my birth.
Mm-hmm.
That I continue to see my therapist for some support as well as an EMDR therapist. And I did at that point for the first time in my life get on a medication to help with my mental health and to help me be the best mom and the best wife that I could. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm really grateful for wherever the courage came from within me to just finally say that this isn't right and I need some help here.
Oh, what you're
Um,
sharing is so important. Like you're really just opening up your heart and letting others know, like if you're in the struggle, like there's help for you and there's no shame in that.
yeah, there's there's no shame in that. And I'm a mental health professional. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I advocate for that all the time for those who
Yeah.
are struggling. I still found it hard for me to speak up. So I
Mm-hmm.
understand the shame, I understand the fear, but I believe, having been treated with wonderful medicine for my cancer diagnosis 34 years ago now, I believe, God created medicine and that these interventions are here to to help us grow our families, to help us
Yeah.
walk through the depths of a hard experience and a hard season. Um, and so, yes, if you're struggling, I hope you know you're not alone in that. Um, and to reach out to someone
Yeah.
and to speak up because it's a very, very hard experience. And I do think my, I guess my experience is when you fought so hard for a pregnancy and a baby, and then they're here, but you're not 100% wrapped up in joy. Damn, that's a complicated feeling. That is
Mm-hmm.
like that rocked me. I should only be happy. This is what I always wished for.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't my experience. I love my baby so much, but there was a lot of trauma and a lot of grief um, that was still within me and that had been introduced, I guess, through her delivery as well. And so just I think that's partly why I wanted to share my story is I
Yeah.
don't, infertility is not linear. We know that IVF doesn't necessarily equal a child. We know that there's so many outcomes and so many process or so many journeys, I guess. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, it's okay if yours really, ebbs and flows and from an emotional standpoint. And if things aren't exactly how you pictured, you're not alone in that and the grief that comes with that.
You're speaking so much truth. I'm like really grateful that you're here and sharing. And in growing, wanting to grow your family, you've been a survivor in other areas too.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, it just like this is the rock star in you. You literally, you just keep going. You're like,
thanks, Lisa. That's
seriously.
that's kind. Thank you. Yeah, so our daughter was born in September of 2021. I moved through my postpartum mental health challenges, and just my husband and I just really settled into a family of three. And I always thought I would have many children, being the youngest of four. And even through infertility, I held out hope. We do have three remaining embryos that we pay that storage fee for every year. And we have that hope. But we started to just really settle into contentment and joy of a family of three. And my husband and I started having these conversations like, is this it? Like, are we, from a choice standpoint, like, are we good here? And yes, the delivery definitely impacted that decision a little bit. Like, can we really go through that again? But we still were like, we are landing on maybe one and done by choice. Like, this feels really right for us. And that was a very unfamiliar feeling to me and kind of surprising feeling, but it felt good. And so we were just living life, and, you know, there's hard seasons in parenthood and infancy and toddlerhood, but then there's these really beautiful seasons, and we're like, we can go out to eat, and she's fine, and she likes to go with us, and all these things. And then about a month after Charlotte turned 2, so just in October of last year of 2023, I remember my husband and I were going to a Broncos game on a Sunday. And if anyone watches football and the Broncos, you know that if you enjoy a cocktail, it's typically what you need to get through a Broncos game these days, because they're not the best. And so
I went to the game just a few weeks ago. I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
so did I. So I'm like, oh, okay, we're going to this game. And it had snowed. It was October and it had snowed. My first snow of the season. So I'm like, I'm gonna be cold. The Broncos aren't even that good. I know I'm gonna have to have a beer or two to cheer on the Broncos. And I thought, oh, wait a second. When was my last period? And I've always been regular. That's never been a part of my journey. And I just thought, wait a second, this is bizarre. I've never been late a day in my life. Until I was pregnant through IVF. That's the only time.
Yeah.
And you don't even know that you are, right? Because they find out so early. And so I said, okay, this is crazy, but I'm going to take a pregnancy test, because I don't want to go to the game and have a beer if the most miraculous thing that we never thought possible could happen. And so my husband took our daughter, on an errand. He didn't know I was taking a test, poor guy. They left the house, and I thought, this is my only chance. And I think I had, maybe the day before, I had bought a test, and because I don't own them. Again, I have a very traumatic experience with pregnancy tests. They left the house, and I took a home pregnancy test. And after so many years of just waiting for the line to appear that never appeared, this double line appeared before I could even set my timer. It was the brightest positive: you are pregnant, naturally pregnant. No trying, no fertility ovulation tracking, nothing. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't even know what I thought, to be honest. So my husband comes home. There was no, every infertility woman dreams of the surprise announcement they can give their partner. That's a huge loss. That's huge grief that we don't get. And I always envisioned it, and here's my chance. Hell no. You walked in, and I told him right then and there. Like, I had no patience to plan this thing. Like, what is happening right now? I tell him, he hasn't even taken his coat off yet. He's like, what? How? Right? Like, how?
Yeah.
So there was a lot of shock. There was some fear, like this, I think that's what's hard too about infertility is it kind of robs you of, well, it does. It robs you of the spontaneity of it. And I remember before this positive pregnancy test that I'm talking about, I just remember talking to friends and saying, I'm going to be terrified if I do ever get naturally pregnant, because I know how much has to go exactly right from a science standpoint.
Yeah.
And so then I see this test. And so there was fear, and there was shock, and there was, how do we do this? Our daughter just turned 2. We were totally solid with just the 3 of us. But then very quickly that turned to joy. That turned to, this is the miracle oh my gosh, we wished and prayed for so long. Like, this is coming true. Um, we went to the Broncos game. I suffered in cold. Nothing to warm me up besides a good hot chocolate. Um, but because I learned through IVF and my birth trauma to be an advocate for yourself, first thing Monday morning, I called my doctor, actually a different, just a family practice doctor. I did not go back to my OB after my first 2 follow-ups, I think, after Charlotte was delivered, because it was a reminder of my trauma and my experience. So I had established care with someone new, and I called and said, I think I'm like 5 weeks pregnant at the earliest. I'd like to come in and have, have this confirmed. This is wild to me. I don't believe this. So they brought me in that morning, and they said, we'll take blood tests and we'll let you know, and we'll call you. And I said, nope, I want an ultrasound. And they said, nope, we don't do that. You're 5 weeks pregnant. We might not even see anything. You could be pregnant, but we won't see it. And you're going to think you're not. And I said, I don't care. I will pay whatever it costs. I don't care if it's not covered by insurance. I don't care if you don't bill it. I don't care if you see nothing. I have been through a lot. I can handle it. I have a lot of different friends in infertility and loss, and I know there's a lot of different outcomes here, but I am infertile. That's what I've been told. And this is the biggest shock of my life. I want an ultrasound. I'm going to advocate whatever I need to do. And they were like, okay, well, we don't have an ultrasound opening for another 2 hours. And I said, great, I will go to the cafe next door. I will have breakfast. I will have coffee. I'll come back. Let me know. So I did. And I came back and I went into the room by myself because I hadn't thought, I don't know. My husband and I talk about that now. I don't know why I just went by myself. I don't think I thought about loss because that wasn't part of our story yet. And so I went into the room, and she did a belly ultrasound first, and she said, we might not see anything because you're so early so we'll try the belly, and if not, we'll do the fun vaginal ultrasound that we all know so well from IVF. Good old Wanda. And did the belly, couldn't see anything, and then transitioned and did a vaginal ultrasound. And I remember kind of looking around, and then she went and looked at what I now know to be my ovary and my tube. And I saw this little beating heart, because we know what that looks like. Having been through IVF, you do see an ultrasound very early on. And she said, you are pregnant, but kind of with that tone, like very low, very defeated, essentially. She said, you are pregnant. And I remember being like, oh. And then she said, but it's ectopic. The pregnancy has implanted in your right fallopian tube, and it cannot survive there. And we're going to have interventions immediately. I'm so sorry. And I just was like, huh? What? She was wonderful. She was very compassionate, this ultrasound tech. And she said to me, do you want to hear the heartbeat? I said, yes. This is the only chance of life that I'm going to have with this baby. And so she played it. It was strong. It was perfect. But we believe it was a boy. And so we say, but he was just snuggled into the wrong spot and couldn't stay. And so because of the location, my medical intervention path had to be immediate surgery to surgically remove the fetus, rather than some ectopics can be managed with an oral drug and have the body go through that process. But mine needed to be surgery. So the doctor came in and explained that all to me, and again, was very compassionate, and I was just beside myself. And she said, where's your husband? I said, at home with my 2-year-old. She said, find someone to watch her, go home, pack your bag, and go immediately to the ER. We'll call him and let him know you're going. I don't want you to wait. all of this in hindsight, now that I know more, is so, I have to say, kind of just wild to me, because I think like 99% of ectopics are found because women start to have symptoms, pain, nausea, blood loss, and none of that happened to me. I'm grateful for literally none of that. I just said, I need this ultrasound. This doesn't compute for me.
Mm.
And I'm so grateful that I did, and I advocated for myself. And um, so checked into the hospital because I had gone and had that breakfast. I had to wait 8 hours to have surgery because I had just put stuff in my body.
Oh, geez.
So just sat in pre-op for hours, and was the last surgery of the day. No one wants to be that. It was the last surgery of the day. Um, Wheeled back, and saying bye to my husband before surgery, that brought both of us back to the goodbyes we'd said 2 years prior, when things weren't going the way we planned. So it was really overwhelming. I am grateful. um, I would say I have spiritual beliefs. I'm not sure exactly what religious or faith-based beliefs I align with, but um, the doctor said to me, if you would like to have one of our chaplains come in and baptize baby before we surgically remove him, we can. And my husband and I said, yes,
Oh,
please.
wow.
So we had that done. And we also were given the option, and we could think about it. So we did. We thought about it for a couple of weeks and then called back, and we had the option to have the fetal tissue cremated and take the ashes with us. So we did that. We used a wonderful uh, funeral home that did that does that whole process completely free of charge for parents who've experienced loss.
Yeah.
Um, and so my surgeon was wonderful, and she said, I'll save your tube if I can, but I can't guarantee it. And unfortunately, she couldn't. So my right fallopian tube was removed, and she said there was quite a bit of scar tissue in my right tube, which is most likely the reason for the ectopic, just meaning the embryo couldn't travel down my tube as fast as it needed to. It was basically a kind of a traffic jam, and so it implanted in the wrong place. My left tube also had significant scarring, and she tried to clean that out, as what her words were, as best she could. And so I end here to say that all of that said, once she saw the scarring, she asked, and I think she had asked me before the surgery just from a comprehensive standpoint, but she said, did you have trauma to your abdomen? And I said, well, not really, no. And she said, did you ever have surgery to your abdomen? I said, not really, no. Why? And she's like, because there's so much scar tissue. It presents as someone who had trauma, physical trauma to their abdomen. My husband sitting next to me, it wasn't pre-op, and he said, or so maybe she was just getting a comprehensive assessment, and then she brought me back and told me this afterwards about the scar tissue. My husband said, well, Claire, you had a tumor resected from your liver when you were 15 months old, and a 15-month-old abdomen is much more compact than a 34-year-old. So even though it was my liver, it impacted my abdomen potentially and caused scar tissue in other parts of my body and my reproductive system. And so here we are, having gone all the way through IVF, we think this could be related to your chemo. We don't really know, unexplained. And now we lose this baby, 3 years after starting our infertility journey. And the surgeon says, I think this is it. I think this is your infertility cause, unexplained factor. I think there has been blockages. And I mean, my tubes were open. I went, I did the HSG.
Yeah.
But they're open. They're just like jammed up with scar tissue, potentially from the surgery that I had in 1991. So everything just all of a sudden came this like
Full
full
circle.
circle.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I know I've been sharing my story for quite a
No,
while now.
I'm just like blown away. Seriously. You are a true survivor. I mean, for what you've lived through, and just to open up and share with others, like you speak with such compassion, and like those listening, I know, are just like amazed in your strength. I mean, anyone who's walking this path, I mean, we understand. You've talked about it so much, the duality of the grief, of wanting to hold on to the joy, holding on, letting go. This is what I speak a lot about.
Yeah.
You really, this is life. You're a
Mhm.
testament to like the power of like continuing to move forward. Your spirit, you haven't let that lighten you dim. It's like you have had the support of your husband, your family, friends, and this is what it takes
Yeah,
as we're moving forward through hard things.
it does. It absolutely does. It takes a village, and anyone who's experienced fertility, pregnancy loss, any challenge on that journey to parenthood, I just hope you know that anyone listening, I hope you know your journey is real and is valid and is exactly what you view it to be. Um, I had a ring made out of my son's ashes, and I wear it every day. And to me, my pregnancy that I knew about for 48 hours is as sacred as any
Mm,
other. Um, and you are allowed to feel whatever way you do about your losses, your grief, as well as your joys, and whatever the outcome is for you and your family, whatever that looks like, you can feel joy in that. You can feel gratitude in that.
mm.
And you can also let the grief come in when it needs to, because it does sometimes. So yeah, that duality is very, very real.
Wow. I love this conversation so much. I feel like we could keep talking and I just adore
I
you.
know.
And um what a gift, and to your patients, getting to serve from such a place of lived experience and an empowered place, where you've navigated some really hard things and everything you've shared. I'm just like your wisdom, you're helping so many and really grateful to you. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share, and for women like you who are speaking out and speaking up about this hard road. It really helps people not feel alone. So thank you for the work that you've been doing.
Thank you so much, Claire. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Okay. Bye
Bye.
bye.